So I started in finance at age 25, and I spent the first 20 years of my career doing it the way I was told. Okay, so how was I told? I worked at Goldman Sachs. You do XYZ, you stay away from the press, you mute your personality, you don't express yourself in any way, and you do really boring, mind-numbing things. And at the end of your career, you'll probably want to stab yourself with a butter knife into your eyeball, but you'll have a lot of money. And that's how we do things in the world of finance. I was trying to do it the way they told me I should do it, and it really wasn't working. So I said, you know what? I'm going to do it the way I think I should do it that fits my personality. And so people that are listening in, I hope that you'll get some insight from that about your own life. Follow what's inside you and don't try to conform. It'll have a higher volatility curve. You'll have more ups and downs, but it'll be a lot more fun. If you told me I could be worth, let's say 10x, but I had to live in a steel tight box and conform my personality, or I could be worth 1x and I could totally be myself and express who I am in my professional setting, I'm going with the 1x. Some other people may want to say, no, I'd rather have the money. I don't want the money as much as I want the journey. In order to have the journey, you then have to steel yourself for the criticism.
Movement makers, excited to be here. We have a very special guest in the house with us today. He is a legend in the finance world. If you guys know Skybridge.
Legend in my own mind.
Legend. Well, you got Ali behind you and Superman. So there's a lot of legendary stuff going on. I'm looking forward to hearing about the guitars behind you too. He's a hero in the thought leadership world for venture with the Salt Forum. He is a podcaster and sort of YouTuber. We might talk about that. His show is called Open Book, and he's the author of a new book called From Wall Street to the White House and Back. Mr. Anthony Scaramucci, welcome aboard, man.
Great to be on. Let's talk about Muhammad for 1 second. Would that be all right?
Yeah.
Talk about the champ. All right. So this is a picture. This is really dating myself here. See, I look like I'm 10 years old in that picture with the champ. Muhammad Ali is a hero of mine on so many different levels, but the main thing is he called out a lot of the racism that was happening in the 1960s. He disavowed the Vietnam War, which was ultimately, with the hindsight test, the right political decision, obviously, because that war was a disaster for the United States on a lot of different levels. Of course, we didn't learn from those mistakes. We went into Afghanistan and Iraq, but he was an incredibly gifted, incredibly smart guy, and perhaps one of the kindest, most generous people I've ever met in my life. And the reason I'm in that picture with him is I used to raise money for his Parkinson's research charity. I became very close to his wife, Lonnie Ali, but he's one of my true heroes. And that picture behind me, when I started Skybridge, the champ gave me that picture, and he signed it for me. You probably can't see it, but there's the champ's signatures on the top of that picture. And so when I'm having a bad day, I like looking at that picture because what do you see in that picture? You see passion, enthusiasm, and you see the champ in his glory. After a victory. That's him after the Sonny Liston fight, his first heavyweight fight. He's such a big hero of mine.
That's great. I've never seen a picture over glass as well, too. So it must be.
Yeah, my assistant and the interior decorator are very pissed at me for that, but I actually don't care. I mean, that's another thing you have to learn about in life. What other people think of you is none of your business, and particularly in the world of social media now, where if you read the comment section in the social media, every time you post a comment, it could be detrimental to you, particularly if you think like a 14-year-old girl, which I happen to think like a 14-year-old girl. So you have to ignore those types of comments.
I love
it, keep going, Evan. It's great to be on with you.
Oh, this is great. So just for some context, this is my group called Movement Makers. Everybody here is an entrepreneur. They're a thought leader trying to build their brand, grow their business, get their message out to the world. I'll start off with some questions, and then we'll throw it open to the community for some questions, and we'll edit it up and put it up on YouTube. Sound fun?
Let's do it.
Let's start with this. Most people in the finance world are kind of boring. You know, they're not doing podcasts, they're not doing books, they're not making YouTube videos, they're not getting on stage, and you have massively bucked that trend compared to your peers. What was the decision to decide I'm going to go and build a personal brand for myself?
let me start out by saying that first time I'm 60. The first time I went on television, I was 45. So I started in finance at age 25, and I spent the first 20 years of my career doing it the way I was told. Okay, so how was I told? I worked at Goldman Sachs. You do XYZ, you stay away from the press, you mute your personality, you don't express yourself in any way, and you do really boring, mind-numbing things. And at the end of your career, you'll probably want to stab yourself with a butter knife into your eyeball or maybe even an ice pick, but you'll have a lot of money. And that's how we do things in the world of finance. I couldn't figure out a way to conform or get myself into the box. And so one of the real joys in life is being yourself and expressing your personality. And I think that the people that are listening, and because I did some research on your show, Evan, or your podcast, is that you're attracting people that are individualists. You're attracting people that are passionate and they're doing something that they really believe in. And so they've made that decision, that self-conscious decision that I can and will have setbacks and I can and will likely fail. And a result of which I'm okay with that. I can go to the cocktail party and tell somebody that I'm an entrepreneur or a founder, and maybe I've had a setback or a failure. I went to an event my first week in my first startup, and it was a Goldman Sachs event. I had worked at Goldman for 7 years, and I went to that event, and the people in that event, in that room, one gentleman said to me and my wife, he looked over at us and he looked over at his wife, well, I haven't failed like Anthony has. And see, because he was interested in the 45-degree move, staying boring, living inside of Goldman and being insulated. I didn't have the interest in that. Okay. And then the second thing is I tried that and I sucked at that, Evan. Okay. I sucked at the conformity thing. And so one of my he's still a great guy. He's 85 years old. His guy's name is Mario Gabelli. If anybody listening in finance, you could Google Mario. Not a lot of Italians in finance, by the way. Okay. I mean, when I got to Goldman, I think they wanted me to landscape the house. They didn't really want me to work with them. Right. And so Mario Gabelli said to me, hey, listen, you're going to turn 50 before you know it. You're 31 years old. I know you think 50 is 100 miles away, but you're going to turn 50 before you know it. And Goldman's going to kick you out. You're not going to be a part of there. You don't fit in. You're going to have to shave all of the points off of your personality to make it there. Go start your own business. You'll turn 50. You'll have your own business, and you won't be able to get fired because you'll be in your own business. Well, I mean, he was right. I'm now 60. Okay. So that was 29 years ago. I left Goldman Sachs 6 months after I had that conversation with him. But the personal brand stuff didn't happen until 45, Evan, because I was trying to do it the way they told me I should do it, and it really wasn't working. So I said, you know what? I'm going to do it the way I think I should do it that fits my personality. And so the people that are listening in, I hope that you'll get some insight from that about your own life. Follow what's inside you and don't try to conform. It'll have a higher volatility curve. You'll have more ups and downs, but it'll be a lot more fun. John Wooden. Now, if people know who he is, raise your hand. If you don't know who he is, I'll tell you who he is. He was the greatest basketball coach in basketball history, and he was the UCLA coach, and he had this indomitable franchise. And everybody looked to him for guidance, leadership, wisdom. And John Gooden said the happiest people that he knows are the ones that went through the journey, the ones where when they got to the pillow at night, did they leave everything on the field? Did they empty the gas tank in their life, in their business, in their relationships, with their children? Those are the ones that when they put their head down, okay, maybe it didn't work out. Maybe you get fired from the White House, or I got torched in the FTX situation, which I write about in the book. But at least I was there trying, And so, yeah, it didn't work the first way. So then I went with the franchise the second way. That's worked better.
Kanye has this quote where he talked about the willingness to try as an inspiration, where most people are just so afraid of losing that they don't even try.
Mm-hmm.
You've
It's
taken
true.
some big bets and had some big wins and some big failures. A lot of the book is about bouncing back. Most people, I think, are too afraid to try, start a podcast, start a YouTube channel, write their book, get on stage, so afraid of the criticism that
Right.
they just don't do anything. So how do you mentally prepare for the potential downside to give you the courage to go and do the thing?
I started out by saying what other people think of you is none of your business. But let's talk very factually to all of your viewers and listeners. Everybody cares what other people think about them. We're social animals. So, of course, we care. So, therefore, we have to build the habits of not caring. Okay. We have to make a decision that, like Kanye just said, or the implication is that the journey is worth so much more than the destination. If you told me I could be worth, let's say, 10x, but I had to live in a steel tight box and conform my personality, or I could be worth 1x and I could totally be myself and express who I am in my professional setting, I'm going with the 1x. Some other people may want to say, no, I'd rather have the money. I don't want the money as much as I want the journey. In order to have the journey, you then have to steel yourself for the criticism. James Altucher is a buddy of mine. He says, you get 1-star or 5-star reviews. People either hate your ass or they like you. And I said, okay. And a lot of those people that don't like me, they probably don't know me. They've never worked here. They're not my clients. They're not my buddies. If you're my buddy, I'm going through the wall for you. I'll do anything to help your family. I'll do anything to help you medically. I'll do anything to help your business. And I said, if you don't know me, why am I going to care about somebody's opinion of me that doesn't know me? You see what I mean? And when you talk to a young kid, like I have 5 children, and they show me something that's on a social media page, and I ask them why they care. And the first thing that they say, because their kids are usually very honest, is that they're self-conscious and that if, there's a flaw. Yesterday I was on Morning Joe, right, the TV show, and Willie Geist, he says to me, "Oh, you're a big guy. You got XYZ going on with the Mets." I say, "Willie, I'm such a big guy that I'm sitting on 2 phone books so that I can be at eye level with you." Okay. And my point is own your weaknesses, own your insecurities. And if you do that, it's almost like what Eminem did in the movie, right? They were going to have a rap off. So he started with every possible thing that the other guy could say about him. And he self-owned to the point where the other guy couldn't move. And I just say this to you, the people that are judging you, you think they're perfect, those people? By the way, people that are critics, they typically are locked and loaded with so much insecurity, they spend their time criticizing. You're out there doing, they're sitting there criticizing, And so you have to steel yourself. You have to get it in your frame of mind. When that young man who went on to be a partner at Goldman Sachs, made a lot of money, was an incredible conformist, and perhaps that was a great job for him. When he said to my wife, "Well, look at I've never failed. Look at Anthony. He's had so much failure." And I looked around and I said, "God bless. Thank God I had that failure. Thank God I was able to fail and come back from it. And thank God I was able to teach myself that skill of resilience." When Governor Schwarzenegger, I sent my that manuscript, the book that you just referenced, and thank you for bringing it up, to Governor Schwarzenegger. He actually read the book and he said to me, this is about getting up off the mat. You don't think Arnold Schwarzenegger has had to get off the mat 5, 6, 10, 15 times in his life? Of course he has. But he's lived a very big life and a big, purposeful, fun life, but not without trials and tribulations. That comes with the whole game, Evan,
So James Altucher is a friend.
Yeah.
He invited me on his podcast that he was running from his comedy club in New York City.
I think you have better hair than him, by the way. I just want to make sure I point that out to all the viewers and listeners. I mean, he looks like a mop, no? I mean, James, fix your hair, James. But go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, again, he doesn't care. He doesn't care. He
Right.
doesn't care what you
Doesn't
think
care.
of him. And what was interesting about that show was it's like, okay, well, what do you want to talk about, James? It's like, I want you to roast my YouTube channel. Like in
Right.
front of
There
my
you
whole
go.
audience. I want
That's
you to
him.
come on and just
That's him.
tell me everything that sucks about it and just roast me in front of my whole audience. Like, really? Because that's not usually how a podcast goes. People usually want to be edified and they want to be, you want to make them look good in front of their audience, not here's why you suck, James, at all these things. So it's a very refreshing take. And to your point of just not caring what other people think about you, to the point of having guests on your show who are basically going to tear you apart in a good way. I mean, to help him with his business. It's not just roasting
Yeah.
him.
My thing has always been be, I disagree with people, but I'm trying to always be respectful. And here's the other thing, I'm 60 now. I've been humbled by life. I've been humbled by markets. It's what Mark Twain said, right? It's like your parents know nothing when you're 14. By the time you're 30, you're like, wow, I can't believe how much my parents have learned in the last 16 years. The point being is I don't have the answers and I don't ever pretend to have the answers. And if you actually read the book From Wall Street to the White House and Back, some of the things I talk about in the book do not reflect well on me. And I'll just mention one offhand. When I went to work for Donald Trump on the campaign, and you can like or dislike me for doing that, I think that was an okay decision, actually, because I was a lifelong Republican. He was the nominee. I went to go work for him on the campaign, thought it was the right thing to do. Whether it was the right or wrong decision, it was inside the bell curve of good decision making. When I went to work for him in the White House, that was outside of the bell curve. That was bad decision making. That was a ego-based decision. That was a pride-based decision. And let me embarrass myself in front of your audience and explain it because I think it's very helpful to understand it. I had grown up in a blue-collar family. I went to some fancy pants schools. I built a couple successful businesses. Oh, wait, now I can go work in the White House for the president of the United States. Well, I want to do that. Okay, my wife hates Trump like almost as much as Melania hates him. I mean, I just got to think about how much Melania hates him to understand how close my wife is to that, right? And she didn't want me to do it, but I did it for pride reasons and for ego reasons. So I write in the book, don't make decisions based on your pride and your ego. When you do that, they usually end up as catastrophic decisions. And so, I tried to write a real book. I have read some of these books. The guy's going up at a 45-degree angle, up and to the right. Everything's perfect about his life. He didn't make any mistakes. His decision-making in business, pristine and brilliant. And he's going up and to the right. And I'm reading the book. I'm like, I can't even finish the first two chapters. And let me tell you what happens to their kids. They all get gugoots or mashugana or however you want to say it. They get nuts because what happens is you don't provide any space for your children to learn. You don't provide any space to see your vulnerability or to see the excesses or the vagaries of your personality. And so, yeah, I have fallen hard and there's been hard times in my life, but believe it or not, that has provided space for my kids. Hey, you're telling your kid you're going up and to the right and everything's perfect about your life. You can really damage a kid because that's not how life works.
How do you determine whether a decision is based out of ego or not?
It's like what Potter Stewart said about pornography. Remember, they were writing that very famous Supreme Court case about what is or what isn't pornography. Potter Stewart said, hey, pornography, I know it when I see it. You know when you're making that decision. You can feel the brain chemistry reaching. You can feel the brain chemistry. It's probably not the right thing to do, but I got to do this to fulfill something. You see what I mean?
Was there someone you were trying to impress?
Myself. My self-narrative. I wanted my self-narrative. I was trying to paint a pristine narrative. Like if you looked at my resume, it's a good resume. You don't see all the underlying craziness. I was trying to impress myself. Kate is writing, what did you learn working for Trump? Okay, so that's a long question, Kate, but I want to say three quick things. Okay, number one, I learned that the government, the federal government, is the most massive, most ponderous thing in the world. Okay, there are 12 million people working for the federal government. The budget of the federal government is 26% of the GDP of the United States, and it's 8% of the overall world's GDP. Okay, so you have to think about how massive and how complex that government is. Second thing I learned, there are workhorses in that government and there are show horses in that government. And unfortunately, we have a lot of show horses in Washington that are preening and are focused on their own personal power and their own power preservation, not necessarily serving the American public. And then there are workhorses. These are men and women that are unraveling terrorist plots, and they're trying to figure out a way to get aid to people when there's a hurricane or an earthquake, or they're trying to solve the dilemma at the border, which is not really being reported right now, but we have a 40% drop on migration over that border in the last 2 months. And some of that, frankly, is just from the cooperation that we are now getting from the Mexican government that we weren't getting before. So, I mean, and I can go on, but we have ponderous government, workhorses and show horses. And then the third thing that I learned, which is specific to Donald Trump, is that that job requires you, the job of the presidency requires you to have so much intellectual security that you can push out the job and rely on the 5,000 people that are working in the executive branch. If you don't do that, you'll wreak havoc on the system. And so you got to have somebody in a job like that is smart enough to know that they may not know something, and they're smart enough to ask questions and be secure enough to tell somebody they actually don't know the answer to something. I can't tell you the name of the person because it's a high profile person, but this person was trying to explain to Trump the difference between a Shia and a Sunni. And Trump was too intellectually insecure. He didn't want to listen. He was browbeating the guy because he didn't want the other people in the room to know that he didn't know the difference. Someone else brought up the Sykes-Picot Treaty, which was the treaty between the British and the French when they were evacuated from the Middle East during the First World War and the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. And this treaty, by and large, has created most of the problems that we see today in the Middle East. Trump didn't want to hear it. He was too insecure to hear the story. I write about it in the book, actually. I had to explain it to him by telling him a story about Lawrence of Arabia. I say, Mr. Trump, do you remember the movie Lawrence of Arabia? Oh, the movie with Peter O'Toole? Oh, it was a great movie. I said, do you remember what it was about? No. I said, well, let me tell you a little bit about the plot. Right? And that was a way of getting the information to him without making him feel bad that he didn't know the information. So, I learned a lot. It was incredibly humbling. And it was a great experience. I wouldn't take that experience away for anything because I got to see something that I wouldn't have gotten to see had I not done it. Are you glad that you got out as early as you did? So, Karen, if you're ever having a bad day, okay, Evan can send you my cell phone number. I'll call and share. Unless it's cancer, I can call and cheer you up because it can't be a worse day than the day I got fired. Okay, I got fired on July 31st, 2017. I was blown out the front door of Pennsylvania Avenue. I got skinned alive by the media pundits, and then I got rolled in margarita salt by the late night comedians. And then you haven't fully lived until you've been roasted and parodied on Saturday Night Live. Okay, so these were some brutal, humiliating events that happened. And so at the time, I was not glad that I got out as early as I did. I thought, okay, abysmal failure, ejected after 11 days in the White House. But today, upon reflection, Karen, I am glad. I almost feel like the universe saved me from an even bigger tragedy. Also, okay, my wife had filed for divorce on me. And so I just want you to imagine I'm getting fired from the White House, roasted by the American media, lit up on late night punditry. And my wife and I are fighting to the point where she's filed for divorce. Now she's Italian like me. So they move fast, boom, we're going, even though we love each other, we're going to divorce. So I had to leave that job and rebuild my marriage. And thankfully, we were able to do that. And that requires, as you know, if you're in a relationship, you got to eat crow in a situation like that. And you got to get yourself going in the right direction. So I had to do all those things at that time. Stephanie's saying, what is the most proud thing in my life? I want to be cliche about this and say, oh, it's my 5 children, Stephanie. I want to be cliche about that. I'm going to say something different. I'm going to say showing up has been the most proud thing in my life. And what do I mean by that? In 1976, my father walked into the house. He slammed every door. I'm sure he broke a few plates. He slammed the kitchen cupboard. And what was happening? He was getting his hours cut back on his job. We were going through a recession. And my dad was an hourly worker. And so he got paid by the hours union. If the hours are getting cut, guess what happens? You get less disposable income at home. You were also we didn't have assets really. He owned his house, thank God, but we didn't really have assets. So when you're a blue collar in the country right now, you get the dollar, it comes in, you don't own assets. If they're going to inflate the dollar, well, the dollar comes in and then you only have 80 cents of purchasing power. The US dollar has devalued 22.5% since January of 2020, right? So I just want you to think about that for a second. If you're a laborer, that's killing you and your family. It's killing your living standards. In 1976, I looked around and said, okay, my parents need my help. I went and got a paper out. I got a work permit. I went to go work at the Key Food. I then worked at a motorcycle shop at night. And I was making about $60 a week. And I was giving $45 of that to my mother. And so the most proud moment for me is showing up. The most proud moment for me is that I have gotten gearbox. I'm going to be a provider. I got to help my family members. I got to make sure if kids are smart enough, they can get to college and get their tuition paid. Or God forbid, if there's a medical emergency and somebody doesn't have the right insurance, you got to be able to step in and help them. Because when you grow up in a blue collar family, if you want to do it right, you got to pull the people with you. You don't leave them in the dust. You pull the people with you. And so that's the thing I'm the most proud of. Okay, yes, my kids for sure, because I've shown up for them, but it's about showing up and saying, okay, what can I do responsibly to help as many people as possible? And by the way, that was the champ. Let's go back to the champ. Champ helped everybody. Okay, and he grew up in Kentucky. He was uneducated, smartest person you could ever meet, but uneducated, but he helped everybody. He was silently, anonymously giving money out to so many different people.
So chapter 15 in this book is dream shamelessly and often, which I love that idea. And you talk about Paul McCartney had this song for Yesterday in his head that kept coming to subconscious, and Keith Richards and Satisfaction. And he just started listening to the tune that was in their head. And I'm curious for you, what's the tune that's in your head right now that you're going to start to listen to?
What a great autobiography Keith Richards wrote. I mean, just so you know, your grandchildren will be tending for the world that they're leaving to Keith Richards. Just so you know, that guy's never dying, okay? And that was one of the greatest books that I've read, and I will just tell you, you should read that book, okay? But McCartney is a different guy, okay? Because McCartney, very different guy from Keith Richards. He's more connected, like the Native Americans called it indigo. It's a color, right? It's that purplish blue color. But if you read about with the Native Americans, indigo meant that there was a shunt between you here on Earth and the ethereal and the spiritual world. And so McCartney has that gift. If you look at his songwriting and you look at him as a human being, he has what the Native Americans would say indigo. And so his mother died. And so that song was coming into his, okay. And so he wrote Yesterday. And then the other song related to his mother was Let It Be. And he just relaxed into it, right? And so I would say this to everybody listening. Sometimes you're charged up and sometimes you're overheating. And so just like the computer, sometimes we have to hit Control Alt Delete on the computer to get it to work, but that's not enough sometimes. Other times you got to unplug the computer from the wall and let all circuitry come down. And so that chapter to me is about dreaming shamelessly, but listening. There's an inner voice going on inside yourself that is chanting to you. If you're listening to it and you take out all the other noise, all your responsibilities, your obligations, your ego, which is what you're identifying with and what you're expressing on the earth, you say, okay, what do I really want to do? Okay. And so for me, okay, that is learning environments, teaching, listening, learning. That's where I'm most passionate. So that's why I've got a couple of podcasts actually going. And that's why I wrote that book. And my podcast is called Open Book. If you subscribe to it, you'll be listening to me interview authors. So why do I do that? Well, now we have inflation, but if this was 1985, I would tell you for $10 and for 10 hours, you can get 10 years of experience from an author. Now it's $35. Some author here, this man is a brilliant guy. He just wrote this book on Christendom. And he wrote about how this religion, there's 2 billion Catholics. Okay, there's like almost 3 billion Christians. And this guy, Peter Heather, he wrote, he's from King's College in London. And he wrote a masterful book about what happened over that 1,000-year period of time that changed Western civilization. Okay, this will take about 15 hours to read, and I'm going to interview him. Okay, I want to talk to him about it because you're living in a world that was created by these people. Okay, so that's what I've made a decent amount of money. I'm hopefully not coming across bragging or anything like that. I'm not the richest on Wall Street. I'm not the poorest on Wall Street, but I have enough money where I can have a little bit of financial independence and I can do some of the things I like, which is frankly talking to you, for writing books or listening to people, and then seeing if I can get other people to get into that frame of mind.
I love it. And I love all the stories. Let's turn it over to some Q&A. We got a whole bunch of hands already being thrown up. I saw Bo Eckstein up first. So what's your question for Anthony? Let's do this.
Hello, Anthony. Great talk. I really resonated with everything you said, first off, and knew nothing about you prior to this call. So thank you. I did a little researching. You're obviously pretty savvy in the financial sector. With your hedge fund, it looks like at one time you had $7 billion under management. So my question to you is, what opportunities are out there for us? Where are you putting your money and your investor money? High level, doesn't have to go too deep, but what sectors should we be looking at? How can we grow our wealth? Would you say are the best opportunities in the next 5-10 years?
Okay, so Bo, thanks for the question. And I peaked at 7 billion. I got my doors blown off during COVID. We got it wrong analytically. You probably should be embarrassed to admit this to you guys, but I will admit it. I left the World Economic Forum in January of 2020, and I thought COVID was going to be like SARS or MERS, and my portfolio was not set up properly, and we got our doors blown off. And of course, I'm a high-profile person, so I think there was a journalist from Bloomberg Magazine that wrote my obituary, my financial obituary, and it made clients nervous, and a lot of clients left the fund. And that does happen in our industry. Now, the great irony of that, we made some adjustments to our portfolio, and we've had the best performance. that we've had since I've been in the industry since that debacle. So there's a couple of things there. Number one, you're not going to get everything right. Number two, I've got about $3.5 billion under management now, down from the $7 billion. The business is a little bit smaller, but the performance is way better. And it's a conversation about resiliency and adaptation. And so you have to do that in life, in every business. And it may get bigger, the business, or it may not. I'm less interested in that, and I'm more focused on the performance. If you said to me over the next 5 to 10 years, what would I like to see a person do with their money? Again, I don't want to be overly simplistic, and I'm technically not allowed to give because I'm a regulated financial registered investment advisor. So I have to talk very generically, but I just want you to think about this generically, okay? The first thing you have to do is put away money every single month, okay? There's a great book on this called The Richest Man in Babylon. It was written in 1926 by George Clason. I read that book at age 18, and whether I was making $500 a week or $5,000 a week, it really didn't matter. You have to pay yourself first, okay? And so you could put the money into Berkshire Hathaway, you could put the money into Apple Computer, you could buy the S&P 500, you could buy Coke or Pepsi, but you want to buy very high quality businesses. And again, I don't care how much you're making, but pay yourself first. You have a cable bill, you have a mortgage, you've got your kids' tuition, whatever it might be, that's fine. Set aside some amount of money, like a bill, and you're paying yourself first. And if you do that consistently over many, many, many years, you'll build a bigger nest egg than you think. Second thing you have to do is you have to ignore the noise. So if those people that left my fund had just stayed, they would have done brilliantly well, and they would have outperformed the S&P 500. But we did go through a very difficult period of time, and we have happy feet when we're not doing well. We have a tendency to run. The dead people do better with their money than the living people. And if you don't believe me, you can go Google it. Go Google Charles Schwab accounts of dead people. So why do the dead people do better than the living? Well, they can't access the account through the Ouija board, and just so everybody knows, dead people don't look at their accounts. Okay, so they sit in great assets, and they don't get happy feet or itchy trigger fingers and sell their assets. And I'll give you a specific example. I was at Goldman Sachs when my first son was born in 1992. And so I bought him, and at that time it was a lot of money for me. I bought him $1,200, not shares, $1,200 worth of Microsoft. Put it in an account. You were getting paper back then. And so they would mail me a statement every month. There's my son's account. It was in a Uniform Gift for Minors Act account. I was the principal on the account to be given to him on his 21st birthday. And I lost the account. Now, what do I mean by that? I moved houses. I left Goldman Sachs. It was a time before you had electronic delivery of account statements. They were mailing the account to the wrong address. It was going into the Bermuda Triangle of lost mail. 31 years later, I'm contacted, and a woman says, "You're Anthony Scaramucci?" "Yes, I am. I'm pretty sure this is your account. And I want to just give you the heads up. We were mailing it to XYZ. Okay, yeah, that was my address in 1996. Okay, which social security number, blah. Okay, the $1,200, $71,000. Okay, and because I didn't look at it, I bought a very high quality company, and I didn't look at it. And I will tell you guys, I would have sold that thing 7 times. Because when Steve Ballmer was running that company, it was going like this. I would have gotten bored. I would have sold it. And so buy high quality, pay yourself first, and act like you're dead. Those are the 3 things I would tell people.
I love it. That's great. All right, Jeff and Ellen, what do you got for us? What's your question for Anthony?
So my question is, when, particularly when you went through the situation with the White House, and your branding was then, it seems, taken over by the media.
Right.
What do you do in a situation like that to
Yeah,
get
that's
your branding
really sucks.
back? And
That really
have
sucks.
you?
That is such a great question. And I don't even know the answer to that question. Okay. And I'm going to say something to you that you'll get. When you go into politics, you get two dimensionalized. Okay. Remember, it's a tough business. So they don't want to talk about the fact that I went to Harvard Law School. They want to act like I'm some Goomba from Long Island. Right. So, like, I was a Jersey Shore cast member. I was Tony Soprano on the Potomac. John Oliver, who's on HBO, I mean, you could Google this. He scorched me for like 28 minutes. Everything he said about me was partially true, but really wasn't 100% true. But he built this beautiful portrait of me as a two-dimensional cartoon character and an imbecile. And okay. And then they go into your Wikipedia. Go read my Wikipedia. I mean, it's a disaster. I was at an event one night and this woman comes up to me. She goes, I hated your guts. I said, really? You hated my guts? She goes, yeah, but I just listened to you for the last hour. I actually like you. I said, oh, well, thank you. Okay. So what happens is you get Flat Stanley. You're a two-dimensional cartoon character. And then you have to blow yourself back up again. And the only way you can do that is through expression. There's no other way. What am I going to do? Let me have a public service announcement. I'm not the cartoon character that John Oliver said I was. So you have to go blow yourself up. When I got fired from the White House, my team at Skybridge, they said, oh, we got to hire a crisis communications manager for you. I said, oh, okay. So the crisis communication manager came in and said, yeah, your reputation has been destroyed. You should probably go to like Monaco for 6 years. And I said, so that means I shouldn't accept the invitation to go on Steve Colbert's show? No, that would be the stupidest thing you could ever do. And I said, okay, get this guy out of here. Okay. And we're going to do me. And that's what we're going to do. But you're asking such a great question because there's a group of people out there that hate my guts. They don't know who I am. They've decided they hate my guts. My son had me really laughing. My son is named, one of my sons named Anthony, right? Because that's what Italians do. I'm named after my grandfather. It's more Anthony's in my family than anything else, right? So my son's named Anthony. He's at a restaurant in LA. The woman says, Anthony Scaramucci. He says, yeah. He says, I'm named Anthony Scaramucci. He says, are you related to the movie? And he goes, yeah, that's my father. Waiter. She says, you want to move her table from the kid? Because she was like some hard left person, and that was it. She didn't want anything to do with me. Okay. And I said, okay, well, all right. Well, that's life. If you go into politics, it's like going into the NFL. If you're in the NFL, you're wearing a helmet, you get a concussion. Guess what happens to you in the NFL? You get a concussion. Have you ever been a smart politician? Of course not, right? Because the right is saying that Joe Biden is stupid. The left is saying Donald Trump is stupid. There's no smart politician because they spend tens of millions of dollars destroying each other. So I don't have a great answer, but I will say this to you. I'm not going to let that perception stop me from being me. Okay. Right. And so you could have something going on in your life. Well, okay, person doesn't view me properly. Who cares? Be yourself. Go out there and live your life. You'll attract enough people that like you. But it's a really, really good question. And I know I've had a good public speech when at least one woman comes up to me afterwards. I hated your guts, but now I like you a little bit.
That's awesome. Well, after that praise for such a great question, we're going to put the pressure on who? Ida. Ida, you're next. You got to follow that. What do you have for Anthony?
So I know you're very much into cryptocurrency, correct?
Yes.
So coming from a person who came from Wall Street, where that was like a no-go zone for a lot of people going into government, and now you're pro cryptocurrency. Mm-hmm. What was the information that you learned that made you to switch to, like, I really like this thing now and I want to push it forward? Like, what was it, the information?
All right. So you really got another really good question, because like, this is like stuff that like, I didn't need to do that. Right. First of all, if I wasn't a risk taker, I would never go work for the government. Nice business. If I go work for the government, you could end up getting destroyed by the government, right? You could get this two-dimensional caricature. Why waste your time doing that, right? And then the second thing is, well, why bother with cryptocurrency? You've already got made some good money. When I bought my first Bitcoin, I had clients call me and fire me. And they told me, you're an idiot. Jamie Dimon hates this. It's a decentralized pet rock and blah, blah, blah. And then Bitcoin went up. And so at the end of 2021, I had clients call me and say, wow, you're a genius. You're a visionary. I can't believe that you bought Bitcoin for me. I'm so happy. And then at the end of 2022, Bitcoin went down. And those very same people told me I was an imbecile. And a lot of them fired me. And so I don't think I'm a genius or an imbecile, but I saw something in Bitcoin that I think is going to make it a very valuable long-term asset in our society. And so I wrote a book about it. It's a tiny pamphlet. It's called The Sweet Life with Bitcoin, How to Stop Worrying About This Cryptocurrency. Something like that was the subtitle. And I basically explained in the book that Bitcoin checks all of the historical boxes of what we have used money for. It's fungible, it's immutable, it's easy to track. Money, whether we like it or not, is actually just a database. So we pick things and we turn them into the technology use instead of bartering with each other. So I always have money on me, so I'll just show you these, okay? So these are Italian singles in my neighborhood, okay? Take a look at these. These are Italian singles, right? As Tony Soprano would say, right? These are $100 bills. They are made out of cotton. If you Google this, it's made out of cotton and it's made out of linen. Okay, 75% cotton, 25% linen. Is it worth anything? And so the answer to the question, of course, it's not worth anything. If we were in freshman philosophy class, it's not worth anything. Piece of fabric, not worth anything. Yet if I give this to the maitre d' tonight, he's a happy guy. If I give it to the valet, they're happy because they have something that everybody trusts. This is a piece of cloth that we're exchanging with each other for value. You're going to give me a pizza, you'll mow my lawn, maybe you'll cut my hair. Okay, and then the person that gets this, he'll be able to use it to get other goods and services from somebody else, right? And so we created this thing called money as a technology in order to transact with each other. And if you read about the history of money, like Neil Ferguson's book, The Ascent of Money, you'll find that Bitcoin, from a technological perspective, checks all those boxes. And it does one other thing. You can't make any more of it. We know the federal government can make a lot of these. Okay, we know that because we have high inflation in our country, as most countries do. But Bitcoin's immutable. And so when I really studied Bitcoin, I said, okay, I have to own some of this for my clients. And if you're risk averse, it's a 1% allocation. If you're not risk averse, it could be a 5% allocation. It's more for me because I'm, in the industry. But I just tell people I could be wrong. I'm not. Again, I've been humbled by markets. But if you had a 1% allocation of Bitcoin and I'm right and it goes 10-1, well, you'll be well rewarded. If I'm wrong, you'll have lost 1 penny on your dollar. And I've looked at it that way for the last couple of years. And listen, I'm a 60-year-old guy. I deal with 60-year-old white males, Ida. You know what 60-year-old white males are like? Miserable, okay? And they all think they know everything. You know what I'm saying? So, and they look at me like I'm a dummy to own Bitcoin, but I don't think I am. And I own it, and I have it in size of my company's portfolios.
Okay, Karen, what's your question for Anthony?
As a Canadian, I just want to tell you that in watching you go through this whole process with Trump in the White House and the firing, just watching you own this and turn it around was an amazing feat. I also but what I do wonder is it seems like you have a pretty thick skin. Is that true? Or is it just you learn to just roll with the punches and, did you just learn to roll with the punches and just let it roll off?
Listen, I think I always want to be crystal clear, transparent and authentic. I didn't always have a thick skin. I'm not going to say that. And when I said at the beginning, right, don't let other people's thoughts invade yours. What other people think of you is none of your business, but you are a social organism. You're a human being. So of course that's happening to you. You just have to build great habits to push that out of your mindset. And so, yes, I have thicker skin today at 60 than I did at 45 or at 30, and definitely way thicker skin than at age 15. But I think I did something that I would recommend to you or anybody listening to me is the owning. Because let me tell you something about owning something. When you are capable in life of expressing your vulnerability, it is very hard for another human being to go on full blast. It is very, very hard because they're also vulnerable. Okay. And arguably one of the most vulnerable human beings is probably Donald Trump, which is why he's hyper masked, why he's trying to, mask over his shortcomings. But when you express your vulnerability to another human being, gives them an opening to express their vulnerability, and it also gives you an opening to build a real relationship. And so I think that was the revelation of that experience, not just how to have a thick skin if you go into politics or learn to have a thick skin. Somebody said to me, well, you got fired. What happened? I did some things. I don't blame the president. I don't blame John Kelly. I don't blame anybody. I got fired and I own my firing. And I think that puts people back a step and say, okay, that's very honest. That's very real. And I have found in my life, the more real you are with people, the easier it is to build a connection. And so I would say this to everybody listening, that the word trust is not near the word vulnerable in the dictionary. Because if you're able to be vulnerable with somebody, they'll reciprocate sometimes, and then you can build trust with each other.
Jeff, what's your question for Anthony?
Hey, Anthony. So writing books, it looks like you've written a number of them. I can't tell exactly how many, but it looks like at least half a dozen, maybe more.
7.
7, okay.
Yep.
Can you talk to us about the process of writing a book? I've been wanting to write a book for 20 years, and I still haven't done it.
The Navy SEALs, they have a great line. How do you eat an elephant, Jeff? You know what a Navy SEAL would say?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. And that's how you have to write a book. And so the first thing you have to do when you're going to write a book is you have to come up with a book idea. The second thing you have to do is you have to write an outline. You have to say, okay, I have a book. Think of every book that I could show you, right? There's an idea, then there's an outline in the book wants to write about, and then you take each chapter at a time. That's my first book, Goodbye, Gordon Gekko. I wrote that maybe 14 years ago. This book was about the hedge fund industry. And so that was more trade related, right? And so those are chapter oriented books. This is the book I was referencing about Bitcoin, The Sweet Life with Bitcoin, how I stopped worrying about cryptocurrency. You should too. Okay. And this is a small book. Okay. And so tell me the type of book you want to write and then reverse engineer into the book, right? And so from Wall Street to the White House and back, which by the way, I didn't have a title for the book. That title was generated by ChatGPT. So what I did was I finished writing that book. I submitted it to Chat. There's an editorial AI service that you can pay for. It helps you with your grammar, correct some of your spelling. And then it was done. I said, okay, I just wrote this book. They know who I am because I am a public figure. ChatGPT does. So Anthony Scaramucci just wrote a book on resilience. What would you title it? And ChatGPT gave me 12 titles. I picked title number 7 to title that book. So the title came last. But then I said to myself, okay, how am I going to get somebody to read this book? Well, I'm going to write it in lessons, right? If you look, Evan said chapter 15, but it's actually lesson 15. And it's only 2, 3, 4 pages. And I made it so that you could open the book anywhere in the book. You could pick out something and read it. I wanted someone to buy the book, fly to Los Angeles from New York, and finish the book. But I also wanted it to be in bite-sized nuggets. So you have to tell me the type of book you want. The Christendom book is not that. It's very dense. And then you start with the chapters, and then you start writing. And then you have an earpiece, maybe it's a wife or spouse, a loved one. You read it back to them. How does it sound? And then you keep moving. And that's the only way you can write a book. And my first book, frankly, I had to self-publish because nobody wanted the book. And then the good news is it got picked up by somebody who reviewed it. And then it went on Amazon and it started selling. And then a publisher came to me and said, hey, we want you to write another book. And now I've been using that publisher for these other books.
Yeah, Neil Pasricha has sold over 1 million books around being awesome, the book of awesome. And one of his best pieces of advice is make your book breathable. Yeah. So that when you're flipping through the pages, it's easy to read. You don't read 8 pages and you're like, what did I just read again? And every chapter is like 50 pages long.
100, well said, 100%.
This is a very breathable book. You can get through it pretty quickly. Alex is next. He has a Superman background to match Anthony. So there might be a story there. What's your question for
Yes,
Anthony?
Absolutely. If Superman could be my spirit animal, it'd be Superman. So it was just, this is actually my email signature, and it was a very special gift actually from Evan back in the day. But my mission in life is to solve the world's greatest problem, which is loneliness. It's something I've struggled since I was little. And I believe if I spread belonging across the world through dance and dance schools, I'll get there. And so my organization, my tribe is mainly volunteer based. So for every one instructor, there is 6 to 8 volunteers. And I want to make sure that as I grow to have 100 dance schools around the world, that I maintain the core of what I stand for, which is making people feel amazing about themselves and feel like they belong. So as I scale, what leadership mistakes besides picking volunteers based on culture can I avoid so that the heart of what I'm trying to do goes from 1 location to 10 locations to 30 locations? Because I know you worked in the political sphere and there's been so many organizations you've been part of. If you can give me some advice.
It's a great question. And I'm not sure if I'm the best person to answer it because I don't understand your business super well. So I'm going to answer it a little bit generically because of that. But I have found in scaling something that you need local partners. So if you're going to have 30 dance studios, I have found, as an example, I built a business in Abu Dhabi. I reached out and got a local partner that understood the culture in Abu Dhabi. And so that we were bringing our business there. He owned a piece of the business. I owned a piece of the business. And it became very successful because our incentives were aligned. And so I don't know what your business model is, but I would say to you, you try to bring in somebody as you're growing the business to bring in one partner, but maybe you have people that own a small piece of, or they have the ability to earn a piece of the studios that you're building. Because what ends up happening is they're now super motivated, okay, and they're super incentivized right alongside of you. So that would be my answer, and there's a great quote. Ronald Reagan had this on his desk in the Oval Office. I think he took it from George Bernard Shaw. If there is no limit to what a man can do or where he can go if he doesn't mind who gets the credit. All right. So you can get anything you want in life as long as you don't care who gets the credit. It's a great line about delegation. It's a great line about empowering others on the journey alongside of you to help you get more. Like, no one asked me this, but I was asked a few weeks ago, well, you're doing podcasts, you're writing books, you're running a company, you're running the SALT conference, you're trying to raise some kids, try to stay married. How the hell do you do all that? And the answer is delegation. Got to be able to empower other people around you to do big things.
So we see the Superman behind Alex. We saw your Muhammad Ali story. What's the Superman story?
I'm a comic book collector. I've always been a comic book collector, but Superman is an amazing story. It's a quintessentially American story. Remember, Superman was created by 2 Jewish young men who lived in Cleveland, Ohio, Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel. And it was a response to the rise of Adolf Hitler. And so Hitler at that time was talking about the Übermensch, which was written by Friedrich Nietzsche about the German people. And Hitler said that he was going to create this Aryan race, and they were going to be racially pure and the best athletes and all this other stuff. And here were these young Jewish men living in Cleveland, Ohio. And they said, yeah, that's not going to work. What works is America, this quintessentially an idea, what Lincoln called the last best hope for mankind, this wonderful experiment where all of our families, regardless of ethnic groups, colors, races, creeds, could come to America and benefit from and live aspirationally in America. And so Superman is a metaphor for that. He is a strange visitor, right? He's not even from this another country, he's from another world. He comes to the country and he has to live off of good Americans who are his adopted parents. Of course, he's raised in a small town in the Midwest, and he does something very American. He's trying to live a bigger life, and he moves to the city. But he has this love of mankind, and he has these superpowers. And so now he's going to stand for truth, justice, and the American way. And so these are all metaphors for the aspirational American experience. And one of the things that Alex, I think was his name, brought up is that he's fighting loneliness. Superman is the loneliest of the superheroes. Because, Batman is who we are. Superman is who we want to be. But Batman's not necessarily lonely because he's another human being. Superman is actually alien to the planet. And so he's always dealing with that loneliness. And if you really understand leadership, and Lincoln talked about this, real leaders sometimes are very, very lonely because they have to go against the grain and they have to do things that are outside of convention. And so those are the reasons why I love Superman. And those are the reasons why the mythology of Superman is quintessentially American.
I love it. Batman is who we are. Superman is who we want to be.
No question. Batman is a dark, and you've got darkness inside you. You just do. Now you got to fight the darkness every day, but you have it. Okay. Superman doesn't. Okay. He is a strange visitor from a foreign planet, and he's a good guy.
All right. I love it. Okay. Let's bring up Spiro. Spiro, what do you got for Anthony?
Quick question for you. So I'm in the insurance business, but I also hold my securities license. So I'm starting to get a lot more active on social media. And you know how compliance is. Compliance wants to keep you in this kind of sort of box. Mm-hmm. So most of the content that I'm making, if they take it, they chop it up, they make it bland, and it's just not appealing when I post it. So I'm considering shelving my 7. The only problem I have with shelving it is I have an attachment to it because it was my ticket out of the restaurant business. Because I'm Greek. I fit the stereotype. My father owned a diner in the Bronx, mm-hmm. And I'm really struggling with shelving it. But it's really going to hold me back from doing what I really need to do on the social channels. I mean, what kind of advice would you give me?
Okay, so this is where we're talking about now really good decision making, which could lead to a bad outcome or a good outcome. Right. This is not ego-based decision making. It's not pride-based decision making. And I think you have to answer 3 questions, which will help you make that decision. Okay. So question number 1, what is it about social media that you want to make more flavorful? Is it for personal reasons? Is it a hobby? Is it for business reasons? You think it's going to attract you more business? Or is it just because you like doing it? I don't know the answer to that, but you have to answer that question, right? So that's number 1. Okay. Second question is, how do you personally handle social media? Because I find people are very bad with social media, myself included. Social media is like smoking. Once you pick it up, you keep smoking. I think these phones, at some point, someone's going to say, these phones give the brain lung cancer. General's warning label on the phones, because the social media, we can look at the social media and we know that it affects our young children. It makes some of them depressed. It makes some of them anxious. They're comparing themselves to a filtered life. They're filtering their life and projecting it, but they know they're unfiltered on the inside. And then they're looking at other people's filters' lives and they're getting upset about it, even though there are people who are also living unfiltered lives. How do you handle social media? Like, I can't gamble. I come from a group of gambling addicts and alcoholics. So I don't gamble and I don't drink. You see what I mean? So what's your relationship with social media? Okay. And how you want that relationship to be? And then the third question, which I think is the most important question, is by giving up that Series 7, what, other than the sentimentality of leaving the restaurant business and the gateway that it created, what is the economic value of keeping it? Okay, now you can always go back and get it. If you lapse it for 2 years, you got to take the test again. You have to have a cost benefit analysis on what the economic value is of leaving that behind. If you can answer all three of those questions, then you'll get to the right decision. And by the way, even after you do that, it may or may not be the right decision. That's the thing I try to tell people. We make decisions. We go left or right, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong. What we can't do is regret them. I don't wake up with a millstone of regret on my neck every morning and say, oh, I failed at the White House and got fired. Let me kick myself in the pants again today. We make our decisions, leave them in the past, right? Lao Tzu, the ancient philosopher, he said, if I think too much about the past, I will be depressed because I've made decisions in the past that I now regret. But then again, who doesn't regret decisions? You're just a human being. If I think too much about the future, I'll live with anxiety because I'll be anxious about the outcome or my failure to predict what's going to happen to me in the future. So the best I can do is live in the present. I have to get up today and focus on today.
I love it. I love the Lao Tzu reference.
And, Dr. Shauna is talking about make a decision, then make it the right one. Yeah, exactly. Once you make the decision, go with that decision. Go for the gusto with that decision.
Janice, what's your question for Anthony?
I have a question on nonprofits. What do you think of starting a nonprofit to help other people? I can go into tons more detail, but just what's your opinion on nonprofits?
Yeah, I'm involved with several nonprofits. I've been on the board of the Brain Tumor Foundation here in New York for 20 years. I think these are always valuable things to do. And I'm going to probably controversial, but I like for-profit things better. And I'm going to explain to you why. I find that you can do a lot of social good in a for-profit situation. And then you can take that money and you can use that money for even greater good. If I'm out there teaching, let's say I'm out there public speaking, and I'm getting paid by my speakers agency to go speak somewhere, and it's adding value to somebody, or it's doing a public good, I now have the money to pay my niece's tuition. See what I'm saying? And so I like non-for-profits, and I've worked in non-for-profits, but I always wonder, if you're better suited. Like one kid said to me once, I'm going to go work for a sports team. And I said, okay, why are you doing that? Well, I want to own a sports team someday. I looked at him, I said, well, come to Wall Street, you'll make yourself $1 billion and you'll buy yourself the sports team. It's going to be very hard for you to, ranks to own a sports team. Maybe you'll end up as a general manager. You see what I mean? So it's probably a bad way to look at it. I'm not saying it's the right way to look at it, but again, this is the same thing I said to the gentleman asking me about the Series 7. When you're making a decision like this, why are you doing it? Is there a monetary reason, non-monetary reason? Is there a purposeful reason? And if it's a purposeful reason and you imagine yourself in that job or that non-for-profit 5 years from now, are you happy and why are you happy? Then it helps more easily make the decision. So I think you have to ask yourself those things before you decide.
Very cool. Tanya, what's your question for Anthony?
My biggest enterprise, not the only one, but the biggest one, is my 2 kids. And from someone that has had a life with so many setbacks and bigger comebacks, I will appreciate if you can share what are the things that you advise to prepare or to give your kids the best chance to live a great life and to do great things.
Yeah. So I got a very eclectic set of kids. I have 5 children. I got remarried about 10 years ago. So I have a 9 and 6-year-old at home, but I have a 32-year-old, I have a 28 and a 24-year-old. My 32-year-old is into business. He went to Stanford Business School. He runs his own fund. I didn't want him to work at Skybridge. I wanted him to have his own fund. That doesn't mean he can't avail himself to the resources of his family, but I wanted him to be able to learn how to fish as opposed to me feed him fish. And so the first thing I would say is find out the passion that your kid has and do everything you can to enable that passion. Because the happiest people in life live with passion. So when I hear a parent say, well, I told my kid not to do X, Y, Z, because that's a stupid job and they should go into being a doctor or they should go into being a lawyer, I always stop and think, I don't know, maybe the right decision, but likely not. Mel Brooks, the American comedian, has a wonderful line about life, and he's almost like my credo. What does Mel Brooks say? Relax. None of us are getting out of here alive. It's a very short visit on planet Earth. And so if you empower your kids to do something they're super passionate about, they will take to it. They'll also admire you as they get older. They'll be like, wow, my dad or my mom allowed me to do it. So my son's in business, but my daughter's a singer. And so my daughter graduated from Brown University. She's now 28. She was having a very tough time breaking in. About a year ago, she came to me and said, I'm quitting. She was very disconsolate about the whole thing. I said, well, relax, take another couple of years. Let's see if some things can happen. She got a big break. She ended up playing Christine in Phantom of the Opera in Europe for Andrew Lloyd Webber. She's now on tour with Andrea Bocelli as a soprano. If she didn't stay in it, she would have missed it. But now she's in it and more good things are happening. So I think you have to also teach your kids that they can have setback, follow your passion. I'm here to support it. You can have setbacks and get comfortable with the setbacks, part of the process. And my 24-year-old, he's driven me crazy. I'll just tell you that. And he's got my name. His name is Anthony, and he is a film director. He's done about 60 music videos. He's worked for Justin Bieber and Drake and Machine Gun Kelly. I could name all the different ones. He's now in the motion picture business. He moved back to New York. He just produced a short film that he's putting in the Tribeca Film Festival. And he's a very creative young man. And he's always wanted to do this. And so he's filming this movie. He called me. It was like 12 o'clock at night. And he's like, Dad, I could do this every single day of my life. I said, what do you mean? Well, the day that I just had, I could do every single day of my life. And so you're a parent. I'm a parent. I'm sure there's other parents here. That's what I want for my kids. I want them to say that to me. I can do this every single day of my life. And I think you have to empower your kid to feel comfortable with pursuing whatever that may be for them. And it may not 100% work out, but it's okay if it doesn't, because the fact that they tried is where the real happiness, I think, comes in.
I love it. Lydia, what's your question for Anthony?
Well, first I want to say bravo, bravo, bravo. You are amazing. It has been such a pleasure hearing your smart, your grit, and your heart. And
it's very sweet of you. Thank you, Lydia.
When you went through all the stuff you went through with the White House, as I was watching, because I am a news junkie, and what I saw was you outshined Trump. You just stood your ground, and your courage, your grit, even though you were wrongly hired for that position, because there was no way Trump was going to keep you. You outshined him. You just had the shine, brother.
You sound like General Kelly, Lydia. That literally, General Kelly and I are very close personal friends, and he fired me and he said, hey, man, you can't work here. Trump doesn't like sharing the spotlight with anybody.
But you could see that.
That's fine. But listen, I also said one of the funniest things that's ever been said from the White House about Steve Bannon. I'm not going to go back. You can Google it. But he was probably the most malevolent person I've ever met in my life. And I was like, how is this guy close to this kind of power? You can't have, I mean, you got to have people in those jobs that actually love other people. You know, I mean, we've got too many people in those jobs that love themselves more than they love other people, you know? And that's what causing a lot of problems in the country because they don't make the decisions based on what's in the best benefit of the people around them, you know? You know, it sucks, but that's the truth.
My question for you is, what made you want to connect with Trump? And this isn't political, this is personal.
You know, it's a really good question. And I have to reflect on this in my life. And it also, again, and I could be wrong about this, is my own view of it. I was a Republican Party fundraiser for 25 years. I'd worked for Mitt Romney. I worked for Jeb Bush. When Trump became the nominee, I made the decision to work for him because he was a Republican. And Jeb Bush told me, do not work for him. He's a malevolent guy. He's going to hurt you and your family. Do not work for him. And so that first decision was the wrong decision. But in my mind, that's one of those decisions where you can go left or right. I made the wrong decision. Pattern of thinking was rational and it was holistic. It wasn't ego-based. When he won, Lydia, see, if he had won and I had said, okay, I raised him some money, I'm no longer, you know, I'm going to go back to work and not going to work with him, then I would have been okay, I think. I think the mistake I made was very ego-based. So even though Trump is bull, and as I pointed out earlier, my wife really can't stand the guy. I mean, like up there at Melania levels, can't stand him. I wanted to go work for him anyway because the allure of the Oval Office, the allure of working down the hall from the President of the United States, flying on Air Force One, which I did for 3 times, reading the intelligence briefings, getting involved in policy discussions that I thought could help the people of the United States is what I wanted to do. I wanted to take a round peg and I wanted to put it in a square hole. So even though the bull meter was blaring and buzzing in my ear, I wanted to do that. That's an ego-based, faulty decision. Okay. And so I've made decisions where I've failed on my ass. I say, okay, that was a legitimate, holistic, rational. This one over here was ego and pride-based. That's a really stupid decision. You put your pride and your ego into the decision-making, you are setting yourself up for a fall. And by the way, especially in investing, and you lock into something based on your pride, it's going against you, but you're an egotist and you think you're smarter than the market. That's usually when you get annihilated.
I love it. So as we wrap up on our time and our conversation, I wonder if you have a final bit of advice, and then how can we support you in what you're doing with the book or anything else?
Someone asked about the guitars just in the chat, just quickly. So I do conferences. So one of those guitars is from Lenny Kravitz. One is from Maroon 5 and one is from Train. Those are 3 bands that I had at my conferences. And so they sent me those guitars as gifts or thank yous for paying them to come to my conference. I don't play the guitar. I'm not a musician in our family. I guess I would close up, Evan, with the following. First of all, you asked me how you could help me. So everybody could always use help. So I would say if you could help support my book, that would be great. If you could subscribe. I have 2 podcasts that are reasonably popular. One is the Open Book Podcast, where I interview authors. I teamed up with a very accomplished British journalist by the name of Caddy Kay. And we do a weekly podcast, Rest is Politics US. And it's a 30-minute discussion on what's going on in the political world. So if you subscribe to those 2 podcasts, you'd help me. And so you asked me how you could help me. Those are ways you could help me. In summary, the thing I would say to people, I mean, this is a very hard human thing to do, but you're here today. So whatever that hell happened yesterday is over. If your parents beat you up, if your parents mistreated you, if you had a bad spouse, if you had a rough time in life, it's over. Okay, you're here right now and you're here today, and we have this temporary finite on Earth. And if you go to that first lesson or first chapter in that book, you find joy in your gratitude, and you find joy in the simplest things in life. If I can tomorrow morning order a Starbucks from the local Starbucks and head into work and enjoy my coffee, you find joy in that. You don't have to be whatever's painted to you in the media. You don't have to be that, but you can be that to yourself and your family. And I think if you do that, you're going to be very happy. I always start out with a gratitude list every morning. It's okay, here are the things I'm grateful for. Or what am I working on today? I think if you do that, you're going to be happy. You build these habits of success. You won't be permanently happy, by the way, because you can't be, because your life is going to end. And unfortunately, people you love are going to die. And this is part of the human condition. You know, Sophocles had a great line. He said, we're always pissed at our parents. And so in the ancient world, somebody said, well, Sophocles, why are we always pissed at our parents? Well, they didn't ask us for permission to be born, right? I mean, maybe some of us are for the whole thing, the life, death, the trials and tribulations, the tragedies, and the comedies of life. And so when something's going wrong, we always blame it on our parents, you know? And so the point I'm making is stop doing that, focus on the present, and I think you'd be very well served if you do that. That's my final message.
The man is Anthony Scaramucci. The book is From Wall Street to the White House and Back. Appreciate you spending time with us today, man.
All right. God bless you. Evan, I appreciate the time. At some point, I got to ask about the Doritos. Okay. I got to see what that's all about. All right.
We'll save it for round two. Thank you, man.
All right. See you.
To watch our last Movement Makers guest presenter, Ryan Serhant, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
In 2015, I did one property tour of a $15 million townhouse that was impossible to sell. And a 13-year-old girl watched that video, showed it to her mom. Her mom came through because they saw it on YouTube and they bought it for $13 million.